Good morning, everyone. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. For this meeting, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public who doesn't use a full name or who acts inappropriately. I'm Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Gary Beller.
Here.
Sarah Boyce.
Here.
Matt Fee, not here. Peter Brace, not here. Ian Golding.
Here.
Jen Carver.
Here.
Fritz McClure.
Here.
Don't see Joanna Roche either, but we do have a quorum, so we'll continue. Please note this meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. We have staff person present, Vince Murphy.
Here.
Vince, I'd never forget you, but I would forget to do all the steps in order. And we do not have any anticipated speakers for this agenda. So please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to share your screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. A reminder to silence cell phones. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. For members who wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And a reminder that you can always submit comments via email if you're not able to attend the meetings. Email to vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov. Thank you all. And first item on our agenda are the minutes of July 27th. Vince, if you want to share those on the screen. I did have a comment on those, and that is that at the end of the minutes where we mentioned Rob McNeil, we should specify what his position is. So it's, yes. So under new business, Rob McNeil has resigned his position. We can just add as director of the Department of Public Works. I think we can actually get rid of as there and just put in a comma. That would be clearer. Would anyone else have comments or corrections for the minutes?
Madam Chair,
yeah.
In the paragraph above,
yes.
The last line, since town council cannot represent both the board and the commission, cannot as single rather than double.
Any further comments? Thank you, Ian.
You're welcome.
If there's no further discussion, Vince, question?
Just a couple of additions and very minor edits is all I put into this meeting recording. The link to the PDF from the presentation that date and a couple of very tiny corrections as highlighted.
All right, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Ian. Do we have a second? Thank you, Jen. Excuse me, Sarah. I was looking at one screen while voice was coming from another one. So roll call vote, Gary Beller.
Aye.
Sarah Boyce.
Aye.
Peter Brace. Sorry, Peter's not here. Ian Golding.
Aye.
Jen Carberg.
Aye.
Fritz McClure.
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. So we'll move to the minutes of August 10th. And I had a note in the discussion section, the second paragraph, so it starts Vince Murphy. Based on comments by Doug Rose, I wanted to include Doug's email that was sent to Vince as part of the minutes. And so we should reference that here based on comments by Doug Rose, you know, in his email attached or something to that. Any further comments or questions about the minutes, Vince?
Would you like me to add my response as well? It was in the information I sent to the committee last week.
Yes, yes, if that's part of the record, we should have that included as well. Thank you.
I'll add it as a PDF after this, if that's acceptable to the committee.
Yep. And we should just reference it some way here. So, you know, based on comments, see attached by Doug Rose or some way to know that the additional document belongs to this particular section. Any further comments or questions about the minutes of August 10th? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Jen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. Roll call vote, Gary Beller.
Aye.
Sarah Boyce.
Aye.
Ian Golding.
I abstain as I wasn't present.
Thank you, Ian. Jen Carberg.
Aye.
Fritz McClure.
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. All right, the next item on our agenda is to review and discuss a draft for the fiscal year 21 annual report from the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee to the town. And I want to clarify that we are not trying to write the report today. We have, for reference, last year's report and a number of notes that Vince made preliminary to creating this year's report. And the idea here is to gather input from the committee so that we can write a draft, which will then come back to the committee for its review and final adoption. So we're definitely not trying to rush this through today. And I realized after I wrote the agenda that the language suggested that we might want to have a final report today, and that's not the case. So I hope that people were able to look at Vince's notes. As he said, he went through our previous agendas just to pull highlights out. But we want to make sure that the committee has a chance to weigh in on what they think were the most significant accomplishments, and in particular, what are our goals for the coming fiscal year, which began July 2021 and goes through June of 2022. So thoughts on either Vince's notes or on our goals or anything else you'd like to contribute to the report. Sarah?
Thank you, Mary. One quick thought I had was Vince had in his notes specific to the open houses, you know, like wanting to expand that. And I completely agree. I think that was a big accomplishment. Not only that the open houses were happened, but the attendance number. So that was one thought, was to add the numbers of people that attended. Maybe even if you wanted it to be that much, if you wanted to bulk it up that much more, we could also add the different neighborhoods that were discussed, or like how it was broken down into groups. I don't know if it's worth doing a short few sentences about what the goal of each of the open houses were. But just that was one, like the kind of shortest thing would be to add the numbers. But I agree that expanding that area was a big accomplishment towards getting the input. I would also add that while it didn't seem like it was taken advantage of, that there were available in Spanish language. I think I would emphasize that as like some effort is being made to reach out to the broader community.
Thank you, Sarah. I had similar thoughts, although not those suggestions, but I thought it would be good for us to demonstrate the ways in which we're trying to reach out to the community. And so I was looking at somehow listing the number of groups and departments that we've worked with, in the context of the Coastal Resilience Plan. Vince had a list of some of the speakers. We don't want to just turn this into a bulleted list of 100 different names and such, but I think it is important to demonstrate that we are trying to fulfill the outreach portion of our mission. Sarah?
Thanks, Mary. That along those lines, just talking about, you have the homeowner brochure there, but I don't know if you wanted to, like, it's part of that. I guess it is right after that. Sorry. I was thinking about saying something else about the homeowner brochure. So it's not just a bulleted list, but like thinking what the goal is there, but it's kind of, I guess it's self-evident. So I retract my statement.
Well, it doesn't say what the homeowner brochure is for. So, if we could give maybe the title of the brochure, that would enhance it.
Thank you.
I think that's a good point. Jen, you have a comment?
Sure, thank you, Mary. And this is kind of in line with what you guys have been talking about, but just enhancing the fact that we have really been working with the public to take in their thoughts and let them know what we're doing. Vince, you have that great section on the fact that we had the meetings with the different areas on island to take in, to understand resilience issues. But if there's a way to highlight, that we actually had members from each area come and present their thoughts, or just the targeting that we were trying to get specific on the issues people were seeing out there as part of that outreach piece. Because I think that message is important, how much outreach we have been doing the past year.
I was reading the report from Arcadis about their activities and wondering if there's anything that would be worth mentioning in our report. What Arcadis does is not technically what the committee does, but since the committee is involved in managing that process, there might be something that we should pull out of that, or at least mention that rather than we just began working with them, but maybe be a little bit more elaborate on how we're doing that. And we might need to give Vince a minute to catch up, frantically taking notes there on the screen.
Thank you. Could you repeat the last point, Mary, so I can take a note? Where did you want it?
So I think above where you're talking about the, working on the plan with Arcadis, my question is there anything that we should call out more specifically, not that we're working on the plan, but more specifically about what Arcadis is doing or how we are working with them?
Would anyone like to propose any language to that effect? You can send suggestions after, fine, it's fine.
Yeah, but by all means, please feel free to email thoughts in. It can be for specific language, or it can certainly also be just hints to move in a certain direction. And Vince and I will work on that draft and bring it back.
Erica has asked that, on these reports that we include what our plans are for the following period. And of course, that's pretty important because the Coastal Resilience Plan will be made public, completed, at the end of September. And a big part of what we probably will be responsible for doing is to try to enhance the public's understanding of that report and indications of what next steps ought to be taken and by whom in the community to deal with the final recommendations of that plan. I mean, that's really what the next stage is of our committee's work, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it's a two-part goal. The first part is to deliver the coastal resilience plan, and the second part is to, as Gary said, bring it to the public and consider how to implement it. So those are definitely our goals for the coming fiscal year. Do we have others? So one of the parts of our mission is to keep the select board updated on recent research. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get further down about potential future topics. But should we have a goal that that we need to produce recommendations beyond just implementation of the coastal resilience plan? Are there things that we're concerned about that we want to address after we have the coastal resilience plan in hand? Vince is capturing that. We'll keep thinking about things. Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I don't know that it's a specific goal of ideas to tackle besides the plan, but maybe it's just a statement of continuing our efforts to engage the public and homeowner outreach and some of those education pieces that I know we've talked about wanting to expand more on, and might even just come out of getting that plan and seeing what else we need to build on from that. So maybe not into specifics, but the idea of continuing that engagement activity.
I think that's a really good point. Vince?
Yeah, this is one of the things that I'm glad that the Education Subcommittee is now part of the whole committee again. And I wonder if, say, when the homeowner toolkit comes out, how could we match up the toolkit with the brochure, and what else could we spin out of the brochure similar, out of the toolkit similar to the brochure, kind of add to that kind of repertoire of things.
Yeah, I think as Jen said, there are things we want to do, but we may not know what they are yet. So keep the momentum going.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Gary?
There's an awful lot that falls under the definition of implementing the plan. I keep thinking about once the plan is announced, there should be efforts by our community and perhaps with some leadership, if we're able to provide it, of how we can take advantage of possible federal or state funding. Some of the steps that should be taken.
That's a very good point, Gary, about the funding pursuit of those opportunities.
That's among the most important things that our island will be looking for, is how are we going to pay for this stuff? And to the extent that there is federal or state or funding, we should make sure we are on top of that so that we can get the benefit of that for our island.
And something just popped to mind. I don't know if it's appropriate for the report, but our terms were extended through June of 2022. And the question is, what happens to the committee after that? I don't know if the report is the right place to broach that topic, but it's something that we need to think about for the future. Sarah, yes?
Yeah, just in saying that made me think of, thinking of just our last meeting with Arcadis and some of the really big picture proposals, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of work for the committee to do and just helping disseminate that information. So, we all know that there's people that attend these meetings very regularly or kind of have seen the process, but we also know the flip side of people taking like a screenshot of one map and like sharing it around. And so I feel like part of, and this might be just me, but part of our job as the committee is to help with some of that understanding of where these ideas come from. And not only the, that first step of looking at the vulnerability, but the next steps of those project areas. So I know we talked about like the education piece, but I think it is like a lot that it's like that longer term dissemination of information. And I think the more we kind of tease out in this report or put more emphasis, I think it will help show that it's not just like, okay, the report's done and now we're going to implement things. It's like there's going to be a lot of understanding needed too, because as we saw with some of the proposals, which we haven't fully talked about yet, some of those projects or rough ideas of projects are going to have, need potential policy changes or things voted on or not, and of course, what to Gary's point, the funding is huge and that's going to be a big step, but I think it's like so many different steps in the implementation, as Gary was saying. So like helping understanding and then like, just all those steps, it's going to be a lot longer.
And Sarah, you brought to mind a point. So our report goes into the town's annual report, which is distributed through town meeting and other venues. And I think we might consider 1 or 2 graphics from the Coastal Resilience Plan accompanying our report to the town. We are permitted to submit pictures, and perhaps rather than photographs, we can get graphics in that would help build awareness of the Coastal Resilience Plan to the public. But to Sarah's point, those graphics would have to be fully self-contained and not needing, verbal explanation in order to clarify what's on them. Other thoughts or comments?
Mary, I think that since our report is one of many, many reports that all the committees, everyone's required to put these reports in. So my feeling is that none of these reports are going to get a tremendous amount of focus by the town or the people in the community. What will get a lot of focus is the final report, the Coastal Resilience Plan. And that's where we're going to have to focus our efforts on, because with all of those reports, people aren't going to wade through them all and say, gee, look at this, look at that. There's just too much material in all of those different reports. People with different interests, specific interests, will look at what they're interested in. But in my view, at least, I'm sure that once we produce and once the Coastal Resilience Plan is produced, that's when people will really focus on, okay, what do we have to do now and how are we going to do it and who's going to help us do it?
And that brings to mind another good point, Gary, is we should consider having a couple of links in our report to take people to those important sources of information. Vince, I think if you scroll up as soon as you have the opportunity, I know you're typing, there was a section where I had thought of a comment you were talking about the library, and should we have a link to the library or should we discuss the library? And I was thinking that we could simply have the link to our main page as a committee, which then has links to the library, or we could have a link to the main Coastal Resilience page, which has many links to other things, rather than calling out specifically the library, which has not been the focus of our effort this past year. Okay, further comments? Vince and I certainly have plenty to work with. The challenge will be to keep it short. Vince?
Thanks. Just a quick question to all committee members. Pieces like this introduction here, and this little piece here about interesting speakers we had during the year. Does anyone have any broad or strong feeling about keeping or deleting those in favor of more space? Because this will be limited to one page probably.
I think we put in the, I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mary. I was just going to say I'd liked the introductory piece with the names of the people that are on the, I think that's important to keep in. I'm sure you could potentially pare down some of the wording in the paragraph to make it fit, but at least in my opinion, I like having it in there.
I think last year, because we were a new committee, we felt that it was very important to give that background. But if there's a way that we can do that with less characters, that would be helpful. I don't know, if Jen, do you think it would be enough to say the members of the committee are listed on the committee's website, or do we want to have more information than that?
My only thought is, and I don't know, maybe it's just a keeping it for, you never know when people need future information 5 years down the road, the website might not be there, or the members have changed, or it just keeps that information in one place for the entire year.
It's a good point, yeah. I'm sorry, was there a hint from somewhere else?
Yeah, Mary?
Yes, yeah.
Very, very important correction in the first paragraph, and that's the spelling of my name.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Fritz.
2 C's. Assuming we're going to keep the paragraph. Thank you.
We are limited to one page, so we're going to have to be pretty, pretty careful about how we fill that page.
Vince, I just noticed another typo in that same first paragraph. The second to last word, governs, should be governors.
Thank you.
That would be apostrophe S, yeah.
Okay, and any thoughts on this little paragraph about important speakers?
I really, appreciated their contributions and would love to take the opportunity to thank them and others. I just don't know if we're going to have space and if it's relevant to the public. Any other thoughts?
Minor proposal from me.
Yep.
Keep it if we can, lose it if we tight for space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. I think like you can lose it for space and add one sentence that's like there are multiple talks available, because all of them are available on the town website. So if you want to put anything, you could just have that one line, but I don't think they're entirely necessary to put here.
Okay, if there are no further thoughts or comments, we'll just move on to the next agenda item, and Vince and I will figure out when to come back with a draft that we can hopefully turn into the final report. Although we may decide that although we have the wording written, we might hold for graphic elements or photographs that would help illustrate it. We do have until November 1st, so we do have until after the release of the Coastal Resilience Plan as currently planned. Next item on the agenda is the preliminary outline from Vince for Arcadis's involvement after delivery of the Coastal Resilience Plan.
Thank you, Mary. This one is pretty straightforward. So we all know the Coastal Resilience Plan is going to be delivered towards the end of September. one of the things that the committee had discussed was how to use the contingency fund, as it's sometimes called. I've totally forgot the correct wording. It's the 27,500 for if anything went wrong along the way, which it hasn't, or any special projects. And one of the things the committee expressed interest in that Arcadis took up on was using it for grant applications and preparing grant applications. So with that in mind, we need the CRP delivered on time. And what they're looking at doing is using all the budget up to that one chunk that's going to be set aside. And then from October through the end of January 2022, use that remaining 27,500 to take a number of items from the CRP to look at how they could be spun and changed into grant applications, take the projects that are recommended, and then see what they would fit in for, say, a CZM grant or Coastal Zone Management grant, or an MVP, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness grant, or a C grant or something to that effect, and try and get as many applications as we can together. This would be a contract extension. It will be a $0 contract extension because it's for money that's already been budgeted for. It doesn't affect anything else really. It just means we have Arcadis on the line for a smaller project for another 4-ish, 5-ish months. It's not going to cost us anything. We've already got this.
And I think your point, Vince, was this would have to be approved by the select board because it's
Correct.
a change in the contract. So we would see it on their agenda for approval.
I had thought it was going to be on the agenda for for tomorrow night, but it doesn't look like it's on the agenda that came out on Friday. I'm trying to follow up with this with finance department, and I'll report back once I know more.
So any questions or comments there? Okay. So moving on, Vince also has a report from his presentation at the trustees State of the Coast report launch, which covered the Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard and another couple little islands.
Thank you, Mary. So this was extremely interesting. I had a lot of fun with this one. Initially, this was supposed to be an in-person event. The recent COVID spike changed that to an online event. The trustees of reservations had initially booked to do this presentation at Great Harbour Yacht Club, and Great Harbour Yacht Club, looking at the COVID spike, just cancelled the event, then it became online. I was really looking forward to it because one of the people who was supposed to speak before me was
Congressman Bill Keating.
Thank you, Mary. Bill Keating was supposed to speak before me, and I was hoping to have a minute with him to kind of say, we're going to need some assistance here in Nantucket. Please don't forget us. Unfortunately, it ended up being a recorded address on his part, but I think the point still got across in some way that the Nantucket does need help. I was allotted 5 minutes, as was Cecil Barron Jensen from Remain. She spoke first about the Envision Resilience Project. I spoke for about 5 minutes on the CRP. It was recorded, it is available, and if anyone wants, I still have the text of what I read. Then it was about 15-minute presentation by Tom O'Shea from the trustees of reservations, talking about their newly launched report on the state of the coast. They did the same report last year for 13 communities north of Boston. This year, it covered Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and the Elizabeth Islands, mainly Gosnod. I can't ever pronounce that correctly, I apologize. And the Nantucket section took heavily from the Envision Resilience Project and also from the draft mid-project report where we discussed risk. It also used some slightly outdated information, but it was what was available on the 2010 census. For the sake of argument, they had to use that information as they did for every other community, but they also did similar to what we did before and said that there's more recent information from 2018 to say that the population is higher. I got to proof a draft of it quite early on, and they took most of my suggestions. Then when it came to the public questions and public comment, there were a handful of questions, and because people are already quite aware of what we're doing in Nantucket and people are curious how we're going to adapt into the future, a lot of the questions came to me. There was 1 or 2 questions about the new report itself, but people are curious about what the town is doing, and that is something I wasn't really expecting, that I'd have to field so many of those questions. I know that some of you were there. I think, even not trying to call in any committee members in particular, I think Sarah asked one of the better questions of the day. So yeah, that worked out quite nicely, and I can put a link to the recording into the minutes once I get them from Fritz.
Yeah, I think that would be good. We don't have that recording on the agenda itself, so it'd be good to add it to the minutes. Right, next item on the agenda, updates on other related and concurrent coastal resilience projects. So just a note, I have added onto this list the Children's Beach Pump Station and Stormwater Plan that was received by the DPW from Fuss and O'Neill, and we are trying to arrange a presentation for that plan, most likely featuring the Fuss and O'Neill engineers. As soon as we can get a date that works, we will do that, and that will depend somewhat on the potential future meeting dates below. Vince, are there any other updates to offer on any of these projects?
Baxter Road, yes. I initially said at a previous PAC meeting that sometime on the week of August 23rd or August 30th would be the next round of, will be the next and final meeting, and it would take in all stakeholders. That's going to be pushed back to probably the week of the 30th or of August, or the week of September 7th. This is not set yet, and this might be subject to more change. They've gotten into their writing phase, and now they're trying to put it all together and pull all the accumulated information and trying to work out what might be a good direction and a good path forward. But that has meant that they're getting into the weeds, so they've had to push back basically on the next meeting. So that will be involving all 12 stakeholder groups. Initially, we were thinking the consultants were saying something like a 1-hour meeting. Now it's looking like it might have to be a larger 2-hour meeting. So just to kind of put it on the radar for people, it's somewhat fluid, quite frankly, and sometime in the week of the 30th or the 6th of September, the 30th of August or 6th of September, those weeks, that expect another very large group meeting. Then the other one, Sheep Pond Road, I have nothing to report there other than that residents have been asking questions about progress, rightly so, and we'll see how that develops. There's not been much to say.
Thank you, Vince. We are not expecting anything from the land bank today, and we're not expecting anything from the trustees or the Conservation Foundation, unless, Jen, there's anything you want to report? No, okay, I didn't think so. So moving on to committee reports. So our planning board, Concom, Peter's not here for Harbor and Shellfish Advisory, Matt's not here for Select Board, Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers. Do those representatives have anything to bring back to the committee?
Nothing that you haven't read in the papers, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Fritz?
I just mentioned that since it appears that our meeting next week is going to include some recommendations from Arcadis regarding regulatory and bylaw changes. I think that's the program. I did forward that information to Andrew Vorse and suggested that he, at least so for his information, in case he wanted to listen into that meeting to hear firsthand what those might be, rather than to have us reporting them to him secondhand.
Thank you, Fritz. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Any other reports from committee members? Vince, we had taken the feedback that getting the neighborhood associations more involved would be, helpful. And so we are trying to arrange with the Civic League an opportunity for Vince to speak to them. No specific details yet. Okay, so new business. Discussion of upcoming meeting dates, frequency, and topics. So What we've learned from Arcadis is that they hope to take all of our scheduled meeting time remaining in August and September to address the Coastal Resilience Plan. I've asked Trevor to plan that his presentations of new material take no more than 90 minutes, which includes Q&A, so that we can have additional time to reflect and respond to the previous presentation, so that we're not quite as much under the gun. It does take some time to absorb that, and good ideas come up. So that the plan for the structure of our meetings that are regularly scheduled in August and September is the preliminaries that we have to do, up to 30 minutes of discussion and Q&A on the previous presentation from Arcadis, and 90 minutes of new material and Q&A. That, as we found out last week, can run over. And so in order to have the ability to take care of normal business and potentially address other topics that are not in the Coastal Resilience Plan, that we can schedule additional meetings as we did today. I realize that that is an additional commitment for committee members, and so I wanted to bring this up as a topic. In the agenda, I listed a number of potential topics for meetings. I've got at least a half a dozen more that could be added. And so part of the question is, which of these topics do members feel are significant that we should be discussing them and addressing them? And if that's the case, then which meeting dates could we potentially add? And I have on the list August 31st, September 21st, October 5th, and October 19th as dates which are Tuesdays, which we are not already scheduled to meet. So thoughts and comments on additional meetings and topics for those additional meetings, please. And really, this is up to committee members about what they're willing and able and interested in doing. Gary, you're on mute. I can't tell if you're trying to talk to us, and then Sarah.
No. Is there going to be another one of those open houses that they had? We had two of them. Arcadis had two of them thus far. Is there a third one or not? Are they planning to do that public outreach again?
I don't think so. Vince is shaking his head no. I think that's a good idea, Gary. That's one of my additional half a dozen that didn't make it onto the agenda. It would be a public presentation of the Coastal Resilience Plan so that people have the opportunity to ask questions about what's in it rather than people stumbling across it, and flighting up social media with, I saw this, what does it mean? So I think that is a very good idea. And the question is, when would we schedule that?
And the reason that I raised that is having looked at the scenarios which Arcadis presented to us last week. The question is, for each different community, there are, in some cases, there are choices to make. And what is the process that Arcadis is thinking about to come to a conclusion? I had my wife is the co-president of the Brant Point Association, and I downloaded from our website the presentation. I showed her there are 3 or 4 different scenarios for Brant Point, and I think people are going to start wondering, well, do we get a vote? Do we get a chance to decide which one we think we should implement? The broader one, the small one, or just the one at the end, which is just forget about it, go back to swampland the way it used to be? So what's the process? And if there's not going to be a third open house, what is the process by which Arcadis or we are going to make recommendations for which of the scenarios we want to include in the final CRP?
Vince, do you have a response?
Yeah, just thinking about would that be something that could be done at this committee or at various Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee meetings, so that we could get that public input and feedback? Or would that have to be something that was done at a different level through perhaps the select board And then a slightly different question that I'm trying to understand for the next public presentation, would that be before or after the CRP was accepted by this committee and or the select board? So I'm guessing from the tone of the conversation, it would have to be before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If there are 3 or 4 choices, it has to be before, so that whatever input can be obtained can be included in the thinking as to which of the scenarios will be in the final CRP.
All right, we were going to go to Sarah, and then Fritz has his hand up, and I have a thought as well. Sarah, you're muted.
Okay. So my initial thought kind of follows Gary's question just now, which was, you know, I think in terms of your initial question, Mary, was additional meeting topics. And I don't think we should add additional meeting topics. I think this is so meaty, like all the things that we have to talk about and go through. And so my suggestion was going to be, we for sure, I think we're going to need extra meetings to really dive in and talk about a lot of this, but I think they should be geared towards talking about, you know, maybe they can be like, you know, we're going to talk about Brant Point on this day, we're going to talk about Mattakey on this day, whatever it might be. But I think that our regular meetings are open to the public, and that's where we get public comment. I do think that we need to have like a major, you know, kind of like the open house style for dissemination. But I think that my personal feeling is that anyone that wants to provide input and learn more needs to come to a regular meeting, because we already have, if we have 3 meetings a month, that's the time to come. And we had 2 previous open houses, and obviously those we didn't have the suggestions on the table just yet, but that's my opinion, sort of people can attend these meetings. They're on Zoom now, so you can attend from anywhere, even if you've already left the island. I don't know how many more meetings that we have before the adoption of the plan, but I think it's going to take a long time to disseminate this information and digest it, both for ourselves, but for the broader community. So I think we definitely want input from the community when there's those decisions and prioritization of which ones we go for grants immediately, you know, kind of stuff. So I think I would just encourage people to come to regular meetings.
Vince, if you're responding to Sarah before we go to Fritz.
Partly, but mostly going back to Gary's point, I can wait if needs be.
Yeah, let's get Fritz's input first, and then we'll come back to you. You may have more to add.
Yeah, it was just I don't, and it's in response to Gary's comment. Is it clear that a final choice of scenarios is something that's going to be in the final report, or are they just going to focus on specifics for the next 10 years and then leave the rest open to future discussion and decision? I'm just unclear as to what we're expecting.
I'm going to note for the record, Joanna Roach has joined the committee meeting. And Vince, if you want to go ahead and respond.
Yeah, sorry, I had to go back and read notes quickly to try and figure out exactly how to put this. So they're going to put forward, say, for some areas, Brant Point is going to be one of the areas, Mattakey will be another one of the areas where there might be more than one recommendation. And then what they're going to do I had to check my notes for this, they're going to put down one of those as a preferred recommendation. Then it's for the committee here, for this committee, and then whatever you add to recommend to select board, or select board choose independently, how to proceed on any one of those recommendations. So the committee does have choice, and the select board would have the final say, so to speak, if that makes sense.
So Vince, do we have a timeline, specific to our remaining meeting dates, which are August 24th, September 14, and September 28th? So we only have 3 meetings before the projected due date for the Coastal Resilience Plan. So in that schedule, do we know when we expect to receive the draft in order to respond to that?
About the second week of September is what I've asked for.
Okay, so we have a meeting on the 14th. If we can have that in hand by the Friday before, it's not something we can respond to on first blush. That would be a goal. That's I hope that that's doable, but let's find out. And if we need to schedule a September 21st meeting because they need that time, they can't make the 14th, then let's try and find that out sooner rather than later.
Yeah. So what had been discussed was something like 70-ish% draft, mainly the text, not necessarily the images, that would be made available to the committee to comment on. And it would be a week-ish thereabouts for the committee to send back comments, notes, and then they'd be processed from there.
And so to Gary's point, I'm wondering if there is room to have any sort of public presentation of the draft in order to receive feedback from the public in an evening time frame. Because while the Zoom allows people to attend from anywhere, there are many people who cannot take time out of the workday to attend a 10 a.m. meeting on a Tuesday.
I'll propose the idea and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Bring back feedback.
So I would suggest that committee members at least pencil in September 21st until we find out from Arcadis what their timeline will allow.
You know, the...
just a moment, Gary. Jen just had a hand up.
Okay.
Jen, you're on mute. There you go.
Thank you, Mary. Sorry, Gary, I'll be short. I was just gonna say, I think this sounds like a valuable use of our time, and I agree with what Sarah kind of said, is maybe for now tabling the future topics to make sure we're focusing on the coastal resiliency plan and kind of answering these questions that Gary has brought up about how we're interacting with the public and presenting it and how we're taking it in and commenting on it. I think it's going to take a lot of time, and I think saving that date in September is a smart idea for us. But I also really agree with what you said, Mary, about finding an evening time to see if we can have Arcadis kind of do that presentation from their point of view, so we can take in public comment, and if we need to process that and get some of that back to Arcadis before final plan. That just seems like a smart way to make sure we're kind of checking all the boxes.
Thank you, Jen. Gary, you had something else to say?
Yes, the Arcadis presentation that they made to us, to which I'm referring, is now on the town's website. And so maybe we should try to figure out a way to make sure that the public is well aware of that, because anyone can go to the town's website now, to our website, and look at our library and see this presentation, and they should do that. And the question is, how do we get we'd like to get so many people from each of these communities to take a look at these scenarios that Arcadis has presented to us. It's all there. It's done beautifully. It was a beautiful presentation, these different scenarios for these different communities. And I think it would be really helpful if we could get, maybe we should get those, those online news. I think that I'm just coming up with this idea, each morning, whether it's the Inky or the Current, there's a lot of people competing who has the most news. Well, let's get them competing to tell all the people who read these things. One of them said they have over 9,000 readers now of these morning publications. Let's have them say, go to this website and take a look at possible scenarios that the town's consultant is thinking about for areas all around the island. Maybe that's a good way to get people to focus on it.
I think we do. We have an opportunity to use public outreach, whether it's the town's public outreach or the various e-newsletters or whatever else is available to us, social media and so on, to direct people to these. Because it's one thing to say that, anybody can go to the town's website and look at it, but only if they know it's there. So that's the first step, is let people know it's there. Jen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mary. Gary, I really like that idea. And I wonder if, to capitalize it, because one of the things we're having a hard time getting is maybe people are seeing things, but we're not necessarily getting feedback on it. I wonder if in that sharing of information, there can also be a link to some kind of short, easy, pre-prepared form that says, you know, where do you live? What are your concerns in your area? What is your response to what you've read? You know, do you have 1, 2, 3 concerns? Just give space for people to fill in and write some information, and it goes to, you know, that form automatically, you know, gets onto Vince's desk somehow or directly to Arcadis. I don't want to generate tons of extra work for you, Vince, at all. So if that's bad, say so, but I just want like just some quick way to get people's responses and reactions, or let them ask questions without having to go find an email or do more work, because that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I wonder if we can have a survey link, you know, whether we can reuse the Arcadis survey that we had before, or create something, Vince, for the town and insert that at the end of the recordings as a graphic, and say, you know, or as a YouTube comment, or, you know, in the description saying there's a survey link, please go and take the survey before whatever date.
So this kind of seems like not that much of an extra lift, so that's not complicated. I think that I could try and get something on the CRP website that we can start sending out for that purpose. It sounds like, in some ways, a slimmed down version of what the Iris app is already doing. So I wonder if we could incorporate it there too, find more than a way to get it out.
That's one of my questions, is what happens to the Iris app, you know, over the next 6 weeks and beyond. People have had difficulty installing the app because it does ask for credit cards, and you know, it's a confusing process. So one of my questions for Arcadis is, how much are people using the app? Is it something that that they've found valuable, or just what's going on there? We haven't really gotten a good update on that. Fritz, go ahead with a comment, please.
Just a suggestion for getting public input and creating awareness that there is something on the website, a draft report. And I might suggest that a letter to the editor from the chairman, basically just saying where we are, and a plea, if you will, for people to go and make it quite clear where it is, because it can be confusing if you say the website, because clearly our website's different from the CRP website. And I've told people, oh, go online and take a look at the report. And then they frequently come back to me and say, I can't find it, because they're not looking. You have to specifically address them to where that CRP website is. But I guess that's enough said. Just sometimes, I mean, at least a letter to the editor, some people will read and presumably respond to.
Thank you, Fritz. Sarah, and then Gary.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what everybody's saying. And I think that if there is a way to direct people for comments, I think that's the most, like, we can send them the recordings, you can share that around. And I'm happy to reach out if there's interest to Jason Graziadei about the current and things like that. He's always looking for additional things. And as long as we already have the, like, this is where to send information, I think the Iris app might be helpful, but I think it already creates a barrier for some people. So for all the reasons Mary said. So if there's I wouldn't do a very complicated survey. I would just have like either like an email or a Google form that's just like where you live, you know, or where do you identify on the island as living, or what area you care about. And then like a blank spot for them to write their thing, whatever kind of response they have. And then the last part is, I think that, you know, Brian was on this meeting from the INCI. He's dropped off since. So I think, you know, there's interest in covering what we're doing. And obviously with how quickly those maps went around Facebook and the year-round community page, I think it's there's obviously going to be a lot of interest and generate a lot of talk. And so if we're interested in getting comments now before the finalized version, then we just need to direct people. So whether it's the Google form, our next meeting, or a public forum, before we start to disseminate information, we need to have that landing point.
Yeah, and to answer Fritz, I am happy to write a letter to the editor for the INM and distribute it in other outlets. But I want to make sure, as Sarah said, that we have somewhere for them to go, so that I'm not just sending them off to the town's website generically. because that's not going to help people.
Quick question.
The other thing,
I'm sorry. Hang on. So we had comments from Gary, and then we'll go back to Vince and then to Fritz.
I just want to say what Sarah said. What I was going to say is all we need is one phone call to Jason Grazadeh and tell him that this is available on the town, and what they do in those daily news things, they put the link in there. So they'll do that, and an hour later, above the fold, the Inky will have it in their news thing for the day. They'll put the link right in there, and that's how everyone will see it. And then maybe we can get them to say, and if you have comments about that, send them in to Vince Murphy or whatever we want to say. But that's 2 phone calls is all we need, because they're battling to get the most important news to the public, and they'll be thrilled to put the link right in there.
Thank you, Gary. All right, I think we were going to Vince next.
Thanks. Just simple question. Sarah, you're available to help work on this with me?
All right.
Great. And I also see people like Doug Rose and Deanne and RJ from Plan Council. Once this is out, I'll pass it along to you guys. And I know you guys are super on social media. Share widely.
Yeah, and any of the conservation organizations, the more that you can share with your membership, the better. And thank you for that. And then Fritz, you had comments, I think.
No, it wasn't a comment. It was just another thought that in lieu of a letter to the editor, or it might be worth a call to see whether they'd be interested in doing like an interview format with you. So it'd actually be an article with interviewing you, with you making the same points, I guess. But question of whether a letter to the editor versus an actual, some sort of feature article.
Or all of the above.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Vince?
Real simple. 2-ish weeks ago, Brian Bouchard had a chat with me. He's been trying to put together an article. It was busy news week, didn't make it in. This last newspaper just gone, another busy news week, it didn't make it in. There was going to be a general article, might be in Thursday for all I know. Can't promise it, but again, we had another busy news week, sadly, with a lot of bad road accidents, one of which I saw on Eel Point Road, which is very sad. So hopefully, fingers crossed, Brian might be able to do something, but I did a 20-minute interview with him. He was talking about a 700-word piece, and he was talking about chatting to other people too.
Great, thank you, Vince. Okay, so I did hear Jen suggest that we would set aside other topics while we focused on the coastal resilience plan. Can we return to the subject of whether we want to schedule any additional meeting dates other than September 21st, which we're sort of reserving for the coastal resilience plan? Any further comments on whether any of the things on this list or other suggestions are things that we should be tackling sooner rather than later? Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but I had a kind of broader question about if we're going to have a chance to discuss with Arcadis the plan from last week. So we kind of ended the meeting very abruptly and didn't have a chance to ask questions. And I have some questions and I didn't know if I should wait. Are we going to do a more a more open recorded Zoom meeting where we can kind of discuss it together and with Arcadis, or should I direct questions and comments to Arcadis through Vince? So those are kind of twofold.
Yeah, I think it always helps to send comments in writing, but yes, the plan for our August 24th meeting is to return to the previous presentation first for not more than 30 minutes before 90 minutes of new material is presented.
Thank you.
And Vince and I will be working on that agenda probably in a few minutes to get that out to people. Joanna, you have some comments? We are not using the chat feature in Zoom for comments, so please go ahead.
Hi. So I think I brought this up at the last meeting. I was concerned about the fact that Capcom is not involved or listening to this presentation or attending this meeting. And so I wrote to, first I took it to Finance Committee Chair, and then she suggested that I write to Libby and ask if they had considered having a Capcom person attend these meetings. And I just heard back from Libby this morning that she spoke to the chair of Capcom and they thought it was a good idea and that a member of their committee would like to attend our meetings, and it's Christy Kickham. And so he's asking for a meeting schedule. And so I'm happy to send him what I have, but it would be, Vince, you'll take care of that maybe? That would be awesome.
If you could just send me his email address, I can deal with that. And just to make it extremely clear, everything that's in discussion at the moment is conceptual, and everything that will, it's just ideas. Yes. And we're very far from design and expectation phase. So what will be in the CRP will be similar to how it was delivered in the HMP, and using that as a guide from close to the start. So the HMP never had any financial information until it was delivered. So this is timely, probably a couple of weeks early, but timely.
Right. Well, and I think you heard that what my concern really is that there are capital projects on the books that the bids will be affected by whatever we decide and whatever the selectmen decide as a result of this report. And to continue planning and spending money on those things doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Thank you, Joanna. Sorry, I had a thought and I've lost it, so I'm sure it will come back at an inopportune moment. Fritz, please go ahead.
It seems to me that we've got the next meeting where we're going to have significant additional information coming from Arcadis. I would just suggest that we preliminarily plan for a meeting on August the 31st, even if we don't have a specific agenda for it, because it seems to me it's just inevitably something's going to come up and we're going to be wanting to talk about something. So I'm not saying put it on the agenda, just alert everybody that perhaps that's my suggestion would be to at least be prepared.
And how do other members of the committee feel about August 31st?
I won't be here.
I won't be here either.
Joanna, thank you. Any other comments? All right, so
make it work.
Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's always within my power to call a meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. All you need is 48 business hours.
Okay. So I mean, yes, for instance, that's the way that I'm thinking is that, you know, when things do come up, for instance, the availability for Fuss and O'Neill to go over their Children's Beach stormwater pumping report, that might be something that they can do on August 31st. You know, I don't know, but I don't want to take time away from the coastal resilience plan to fit these things in. Any thoughts about additional meetings in October? So the idea there would be that we would have the coastal resilience plan and we would have a lot to talk about, or that we would have been, you know, 2 months away from talking about anything but the coastal resilience plan, and we might have other things to talk about. Do we want to make any commitment at this point for October meetings, or do we want to play that by ear? We do have time. Joanna, you're muted. I couldn't tell if you were saying something.
Yes, I think we probably should plan for those meetings. I think this is a lot of information to digest and to figure out how we're going to put it into some sort of talking points and communicate. I think all the suggestions that were made this morning are really very good. And I think that also it would be helpful to just be able to discuss things in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Joanna. Other committee members feeling about October? Jen?
Thank you, Mary. The one thing I would say is that the proposal for October 5th, that is the Martha's Vineyard Coastal Conference, is okay. Monday, Tuesday. You know, they alternated back and forth between Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and they're doing the Martha's Vineyard one this year. So that's something that we all might potentially be interested in attending virtually. But then I would say the 19th, I agree with what Joanna said. We might just want to have it on the books because we will have a lot that we're working with.
So if we add September 21st, October 19th, and we did add today, that moves us from 2 meetings a month to 3 meetings a month. We're holding on to August 31st as a maybe we'll need it. I'm happy to take October 5th off the list because I'm really reluctant to just have us keep meeting week after week after week. It is nice to get a break. So we have sort of 2.5 additional meeting proposals, and we'll see what happens with an agenda for those, and see what's useful. But I think that it's a good expectation to add one in October, add one in September, and if we have to, we'll add another one in August. We have that extra week. I guess there's 5 Tuesdays in August or September. So we're not planning on meeting the Tuesday, which is the day after Labor Day. All right. Any further thoughts on additional meeting topics or dates? So in addition to what I have on the agenda as potential topics, I also had come up with discussion of the Mattocket sewer extension. How should coastal resilience factor into that discussion? It's not an urgent issue, but it's one that might be on our radar. The July report from Arcadis, their activities, is there anything there that we want to review? We just received that report. We already talked about how to present the coastal resilience plan to the public, and asking for comments on the draft coastal resilience plan. We had questions about the resilience efforts in Hyannis and the steamship operations being highly impacted. Should we have a meeting topic about that? So that those, in addition to what the other things that have been mentioned, a lot of opportunity, things happening all at once, and then events from Acclimate in September for the coastal resilience, the Climate Change Awareness Month. I don't know if we'll have any participation in those or any co-sponsorship. Right now, I don't think we have the capacity to plan additional commitments on the part of our members, but we may want to attend. Gary?
Just thinking, since the report, once the report is done, Arcadis will have completed its contract with us, and except for that $27,000, whatever that was, the contingency fund, which Vince talked about with us before. I guess my real question is that once the report is done, there may be a few other items in addition to what we were thinking about asking Arcadis to focus on. The funding is very important, of course, but there may be a couple of other subjects. Vince, will we have the flexibility to use that contingency fund to request them to do a variety of things besides, grant research on how we can fund some of these things? Hopefully we'll have that flexibility.
So yes, this is something that I have not brought up at this committee yet. It's a very tentative idea that hasn't gone anywhere. I'm somewhat hesitant to bring it up, but we've played with the idea of a retainer contract just so that we could go to them for these kind of questions, or if there's something we might need further feedback on in, say, a few months, a year, a few years, or things might come up along the way that we won't need more clarification on. But that would have to be done under some kind of retainer contract, but that is not progressed at all. But it is something that has been kicked about, but it is extremely tentative, but it's an idea.
I'll note that Matt Fee has joined the meeting.
Yeah, sorry guys, just out of the bakery. It's been a long week.
Okay, I think we do have time for public comment. We certainly are not near the end of our meeting. So are there members of the public who have questions or comments? I'll recognize Doug Rose.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'll start by saying, I think this committee is probably doing more important work than any other committee on the island right now. It's just fascinating, and I think you guys are doing a great job. So now that I've pandered to you, I have to ask or make a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. One, any referencing to people being able to find, members of the public being able to find documents on the town website or in the archive for CRAC, I think is it's a challenge as a layman to be able to find those things because there really isn't a very good search function. So to reinforce some of the other people's comments, if you can make the links and drive people specifically to a location and then add to that an easy way to offer feedback, I think those would be really, really critical. So I guess I'm just reinforcing some earlier comments.
Can I jump in for a sec? That's one of the
Please.
reasons why I fill the agenda with links, is so that people do have a resource to get to exactly what we're talking about. But thank you for reiterating the importance of that.
Much appreciated. Thank you. The debate or the discussion around specific neighborhood interest groups, organizations, associations, and even individuals that have a particular passion for a specific location on the island. I think it's important to get all that input. And I totally endorse that and the call for input. I guess I would offer just another cautionary note, which is, I think part of the critical mission of this group is to act as the objective oversight group. That if left to each individual neighborhood's interests, every neighborhood would be hard armored, because no one wants to see the loss of their beloved neighborhood, their backyard, what have you. And so I guess I would just encourage you all to reach out, get all that feedback, but don't lose your objectivity, because that's what you guys are doing here. And I would just add to that, every one of you has a residence. And I think anytime that someone's specific neighborhood is being addressed, I would ask if it's appropriate to potentially recuse yourself from those kinds of debates. That's where I was. Thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you, Doug. RJ Turcotte.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Thanks for having public comment. Thanks also to Vince and Jen for letting me know last week that my camera was on, like the whole meeting. I accidentally took you guys on a tour of the inside of the kayak in Capon Pond last week, so sorry about that. I joined a little late this morning, but I heard Vince mention trying to get some more of this stuff out there, and anything you guys want to send to Meg Browers and I, we'll put on the Land Council's pages, Instagram. We can put it in an e-newsletter, which we do. We have one that's already written for next week, but every 2 weeks we do an e-newsletter. So we're happy to help with shouting all the stuff you're doing from the rooftops. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Let me ask a quick question of the committee members. My thought has been that Arcadis is going to cover, regulatory and other important issues in our next meeting, and that public outreach would be well suited to follow that, because we would have 3 substantial areas covered by Arcadis in our last 3 meetings in their presentations, and we could provide, links so that people could look at each of those. And then we do have a break where Arcadis is not coming back. So I think that's an opportune time. And that's sort of what I'm thinking, is that, I'll be happy to, draft a letter to the editor. We need some time to get a survey or other landing page up. We have the presentation from Arcadis, and then following that on the 24th is a good time to do a public push. Do other people have thoughts on that scheduling? I'm not seeing any comments, so I assume that sounds all right. All right, seeing nods for that, thank you. Are there other members of the public with comments?
Yes, Mary, it's Deanne.
Go ahead, Deanne Atherton.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad Matt has joined the group. As you probably know, I'm speaking on behalf of the Coastal Conservancy, and we're one of the stakeholder groups that's been involved in the Arcadis-Baxter Road project. And that project, I believe the due date, Vince, is first week in September. And we had occasion to go back and review the select board discussion, the only one that was held in public, which was on February 10th. And one of the questions at that time that was raised was, how does the Arcadis-Baxter Road project fit into the overall coastal resiliency plan? And at that time, it was explained, the response was that it will be up to CRAC, if I recall correctly, Matt can verify this, to mesh the two reports so that we have one seamless plan, because all of the processes are so interrelated. So I wanted to just bring that up to CRAC. I mean, the Baxter Road project has been kind of put off to the side and is going along at a parallel path, but is very related to all of this. So will there, I guess so that's my general comment. Maybe Matt wants to follow up on that. Am I remembering that correctly, Matt?
Dan, did you also have a question? I'm sorry, it just sounded like you were about to go on, but then pause. So I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to respond in full.
Thank you, Mary. I guess the question would be, or the suggestion is that as you're planning your work, if indeed there is going to be a role for CRAC in meshing the two Arcadis reports, that needs to be taken into account in your scheduling.
Thank you. I think that's definitely on our mind. I don't agree necessarily that the other project has been put to the side, but Vince has a response for that.
Thank you, Mary. So the due date for the Baxter Road project is one of the first things Deanne mentioned, and she said early September. There might be a draft early September, but the due date for the report is the same as the CRP. They're both the end of September. The purpose in having Arcadis undertake the Baxter Road project is so that the same company would make the mesh. Is there a role in CRAC for this? Potentially, but one of the ways that we've been discussing it is to understand how they work side by side without contradiction for the sake of argument. And one of the criteria that I've mentioned and asked Arcadis if they could possibly see if it would work this way is if you were to put, just as hypothetical, if you were to put the Baxter Road project into the CRP, would it just look like a chapter along the way? And they said that's what they would hope for as well, just to get an idea of how they should mesh. There is going to be some locally specific answers within the Baxter Road project, but also within the CRP, there's going to be locally specific recommendations for all areas of the island. Sconset, downtown, Madikit, you name it. So there's going to be uniqueness throughout it, and it's going to be quite bespoke.
Thank you, Vince. Matt, did you want to add comments?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's our job to mesh it. I think that wasn't my understanding. My understanding was that it would be meshed as Vince just described, and that would be, it would just be more detail and a little more robust, because it has to be, compared to the others. So, my understanding is we would be getting a little more detail on that section of the plan and what to do, as opposed to some of the others, which we'll have to get to that detail later. So, I think that was my understanding.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne. Any other public comment? Okay, so we do have on our agenda the list of reminders about how to stay in touch with the committee, how to look at some of the past presentations that were significant. Just a reminder to the public, those links are all on the agenda, and we do try to add to those as they happen. Is there any further comments from the committee? Gary?
Yes, I want to know who's going to call Jason Grassaday and tell him that we'd love to have them put that link in. Give somebody this responsibility. Sarah knows him. I don't know him personally, but
I know him, but I'm happy to
do it. They'll be glad to do it, and let's get it done. That link will be right there, and above the fold, we'll put it in the very next day. So two big news disseminators on the island will get some focus on these plans.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Gary. I've been in touch with all three of the e-newsletters in the past.
Fabulous.
Just want to make sure, like Vince was going to work on before we put the link in, so don't call Jason yet. Right. We need to have like what's going to happen like this. So, and Vince, I am happy to help you with that if you want a hand.
All right, so we'll have our meeting next week, and we'll look for public outreach to start happening after that, giving us a little time to get ready for it. If there are no other comments, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Vince, I'm sorry, go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry, Mary, just because you didn't mention it yourself, just to acknowledge that Mary will be presenting the climate change proclamation to Select Board tomorrow night.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Vince. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Fritz. I'll take Matt as a second. Roll call vote. Gary Beller.
Aye.
Sarah Boyce.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Ian Golding.
Aye.
Jen Carber.
Aye.
Fritz McClure.
Aye.
Joanna Roach.
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you.